The missionaries kept on trying to contact me, and I was like so embarrassed that I'm getting divorced now. And so I started ghosting them too. They'd reach out to me and they'd ask me like, how's your wife? How's your family back home? And I just was like, nope, this is not happening. And that divorce, like, it put me in such a bad spot. I was at like my lowest ever, and I was drinking a lot. I was using a lot of nicotine and just in a very, very dark spot.
If you've ever wondered why we do ads on the podcast, it's because the revenue that we get from ads helps us keep the podcast alive and keep the podcast going. So we have decided that we are only going to do advertising for those who we just fully support and love. And one of those people is Mike from Mike's Auto Shack. You guys, I cannot tell you how amazing Mike is. He is the most genuine human being. He has been buying cars for people for over 28 years. It doesn't matter if you live in Florida, Texas, Utah, California. Mike will get you a car from your local auction. And so you don't have to travel too far to pick it up. And he only buys cars with a full factory warranty. So go register on his website, mikesautoshack.com. People on our team have personally purchased cars from Mike, and we just love him, and we love how much he loves the podcast. So go buy a car from Mike. Hey, come back, family. I just wanted to take a moment before we get into today's episode to tell you I love you guys. Genuinely, the messages, the reviews, the way you show up week after week. I don't take any of that for granted, not even for a second. When I started Memoir Jewelry, it came from a really personal place. My goal was simply to create a physical reminder of the Savior and our Heavenly Father's constant, unwavering love for us. Easter is when Memoir feels most alive to me because everything we make, every piece, every design points back to the resurrection, to our Savior, to the fact that He lives, that because of what happened that Sunday morning, we can come back. And that's the whole purpose, right? That's the whole podcast. So in honor of Easter, I want to offer you something. Use code RISEN at memoirjewelry.com and you'll get 20% off your entire order through Easter Sunday. And if you're local to St. George, come find us in person. We have a kiosk inside Red Cliffs Mall, and I would love to meet you face to face. So thank you for being here. Thank you for letting Memoir be part of your story. He is risen and we remember him. Okay, Brandon, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've been coming in blind to the podcast episodes because Britt and our team do all the like pre-interview and all of that. And so it's super exciting for me to come in and just hear your story for the first time. So I'm excited.
Yeah. I'm glad. When I give talks and stuff in church, I always try to like wrap a little bit of it inside my talk, and everybody's always like, oh my gosh, like we wish we could hear your story more often. And so I was always just like, oh, I wish I could like put it out there. And I saw your podcast one day and I was like, oh man, like what a treat it would be to get on there, you know? So
comeback
thank you so
podcast
much.
material. I love it. Were you able to get our necklace that we sent you?
No, not yet. I'm in the middle of moving. So I was living in Italy for the last 4 years. And then I just got back to the States. And so we don't really have an address. So.
Okay. Well, when you do, you're going to love it.
Awesome. I can't wait. I've seen everybody getting it. And so I can't wait.
Okay. I'm going to need a selfie from you when it comes. So.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Well, let's jump into your story.
Yeah. I was born in Hood River, Oregon. That's where I grew up my whole life. I was born in 2001, so 2000s baby. My childhood was kind of like any other LDS childhood. You know, grew up in the church and got baptized at 8. But then when I got to middle school, my parents, they got divorced. So when I was probably like 12, I kind of saw signs of it going on, or like it going towards that way. And one of my best friends, her parents just got divorced right before mine. So I was just like in constant fear of that happening to my parents. And it happened right after my grandma also passed away. So my mom and my dad were super close with my grandma. And so it was just like one jab after another. I didn't learn until later how much that affected my dad, but it did. and that kind of led to them getting divorced. And it wasn't so much the divorce that affected me, right? It was the like me seeing all the signs and seeing it happen in front of my eyes was kind of what affected me the most. So that was like in middle school. It was a pretty like rough divorce, a lot of back and forth, and just like drugs forever. And so it started when I was in middle school, and the divorce wasn't really like settled or anything till I was like well into high school. And so that's when it got like really tough, was in high school. And that's kind of where my faith in church just completely dropped off. And it was my freshman year. I had terrible grades and like just nothing really seemed to matter. And even at that young of an age, I started getting really into the wrong crowds and started drinking my freshman year. And then going into my sophomore year, it was pretty much the same thing. And at that point, I kind of checked out of church completely. Church was like the last thing on my mind. I kind of just went to make my mom happy. And that's kind of how it was for the next like 10 years, really. I was going to counseling, and it was like all for my parents, really, like, oh, I'll go, but like just to make them happy. I have a younger brother and sister too. They were like too young to kind of understand what was going on through all of it. And so I kind of like checked everybody out of my life at that point. And I tried to go to the bishop. I tried to do these things. I tried going on temple trips, and the whole time I was just like I could care less what I'm doing. So then my junior and going to my senior year, I was like super into being like with the cool kids. And the youth LDS presence in our town isn't great, especially when I was in high school. I think it's better now, but when I was in high school, like our town was known as like the bad Mormons, and that we were like the troublemakers. We were the ones who didn't follow the rules or anything. And so you just kind of like you either do that or you don't. And it just seems more times than not everybody wanted to just go down that road. And then it was like you were weird if you wanted to go down the other path. Which is like looking back on it now, it's like ridiculous. Like it makes no sense. And
I think that it's a real thing where
yeah.
like I think it's still that way today. And for
Mhm.
adults, like I think about my age group
Yeah.
and how, you know, leaving the church is like some people perceive that as like the cool thing to do. And I'm thinking to myself, like, do you know what's actually really the cool thing is having a higher purpose in your life
Mhm.
and believing that there is a purpose and a God that loves you and like being present for his interactions with us in our everyday life. Like that's actually way cooler than like trying to do this whole thing by yourself.
Yeah. No, it really is. And like having that purpose now and then like trying to explain that to my brother when he was in high school and my sister now. And they're just like, oh, yeah, okay. I'm like, no, you got to believe me. Like, look at my life. Look what I've been through. And they're like, oh, okay, like, sure. Like, I wish that I had somebody who was telling me what I'm telling my brother and sister, but even if there were people that were trying to tell me that, like, I have no doubt that I probably would have pushed them away because I didn't really have anybody that I let in other than I got a girlfriend my junior year of high school, and we dated for 6 years. And so that was well after high school, we were still together. But that was kind of like the only person that I didn't really push away, and I still kind of pushed her away. So, but yeah, that brings me to after high school with like my mission. It was so much pressure to go on a mission, and all those people that were like coming down and trying to talk to me and be like, "Hey, like, is this something you're interested in?" Like, just completely push them out. And so like that hurts me looking back because I was probably just like a mean little teenager. But yeah, so I joined the military after high school. It was probably about a year after high school I joined the military. And I think my reason for that was that I was too embarrassed to repent to go on a mission.
Mhm.
And my cousin, he's probably one of my like best friends and my closest cousin, but we were a year apart, and he wasn't as bad of a kid as me, but he had his things, and he did repent and he did go on a mission. And it took him a really long time to do all that. It's a big process. And I was just like, I'm not doing that. Not because it was going to take a long time, but I was just like so embarrassed and like ashamed, like that. So I just picked the military and ran with it. And funny enough, I think that me joining the military, like, kind of, I brought faith back into my life, and I started kind of like paying more attention to church and when I would go to church because I knew that everywhere I went, there'd be church there.
What was the reason that you felt like you were more open to like the spiritual side of your life with joining the military?
I think because I convinced myself that it was like my own way of going on a mission, and it made me feel better doing that, like saying that to myself and telling my mom that. Because when I told her that I was joining the military, she was heartbroken. Like she couldn't believe that I would do such a thing and not go on a mission. And funny, it's kind of funny. Now it's funny. But when I told her, she went to her room and she did like the thing that like little kids do when they're in their room and they cry loud enough for the parents to hear. So she was like doing that so like I could hear her cry and like feel bad. I was just sitting there like, oh man, like that did not go over well. I think that like I convinced myself saying like, oh, me going into the military is just a different way I can spread the gospel to people. But really, I think I was just saying that to like make myself feel better and make the people around me like understand why I was doing that. Because I mean, I think there's so much pressure on people going on missions, and
Yeah.
there's pros and cons to it. But for me, it was just like I want people to stop asking me if I'm going on a mission. So I
Yeah.
just like pulled the trigger on the military and went with it.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I got to the military, and so basic training is right at the beginning. You go there. I went for 9 weeks, and there was somebody in my group of like 50 people that you spend the 9 weeks with, and he was LDS too. And he just got done with his mission, and he would like pull me because on Sundays you can go to church, but it was during COVID, so it was on a TV, and so he'd pull me in to go to church with him, and I was fine, and it was just kind of a way to get out of doing the military stuff, and you get an hour to yourself really. And then after basic training, again, I just stopped going, stopped caring about it, and I was always finding myself just making excuses not to go back. Like it's just not for me. It's just not what I want to do. My whole life, it's just like the rules, the rules, the rules, and like I just didn't want to follow the rules. And I was always just telling myself like, oh, like I like this part, but I don't like this part. And the parts that I didn't like were just the worst parts of it. And then right after basic training and you go to another school to learn your job, you get to go home. So I went home, and I remember I went home for I think like 2 weeks, and I had my last week there was a fast and testimony on Sunday. I went with my mom and I went for my testimony. And like looking back at like my whole timeline, it's like, why didn't you just grab that glitter of hope and like run with it? Because my testimony then was like really strong, and like I really believed in the church right then. And and I really like just poured my heart out into it, and I was sobbing, crying, and I went back and sat down and was like, oh, I feel good about this. Like I'm really happy that I did that. And like I felt the spirit.
What like brought you to that point? You'd been like over it, like it
Yeah.
was you didn't want anything to do with it. So like what brought you to that point of being able to share your testimony like that?
I think it was just like every time I bear my testimony, it's just like that. You get all hot, or I get all hot, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, do I go? Do I not? And then my mom, I think she kind of knew that I was like, it's not all about church. And so she was like sitting there. She's a big crier. My whole family's a big crier or big criers. And she was crying, and I was about to leave to Italy the next day. And I was just like this overwhelming like feeling of like, if I go bear my testimony, like it'll make her happy. And when I started talking, like I didn't really like know what I was saying. I was just talking, and everything that came out was like from my heart. But then I left to Italy and it just like stopped again, which again is just like crazy that, I mean, that's how it works. So, you get built up so strong and it's so easy for it to just stop. When I got there, I was having a really hard time because I was 19 when I got there, and like my first time ever leaving home, and my mom reached out to the church out there. There's a military ward. So it's all military members. and they all started contacting me, and they're like, "Hey, like we heard you just moved here and part of the ward," and I would just ghosted all of them. Like I don't know why, I just didn't want anything to do with them. Like it was like easy for me to ghost them. Like I just didn't care. And then the lifestyle out in Italy, everybody knows it's just like relaxing and drinking wine and smoking cigarettes. Like that's all they do. And I just in the military community, it's like all they do. It's super easy for me to get sucked back into like a heavy drinking routine. And then you also, if you're 18, you can drink legally out there, so it's super easy for me. And that's kind of how my life was for the next like 3 years. And over that time, like the church constantly like reached out, like, "Hey, do you need anything?" And I would just completely ghost them. The way that the military ward works is same as any other ward, but it's all military members. And then there's elder missionaries there, and they're actually prior military that they get to go to military bases overseas and serve missions. And I met some of them at the gate, so I work at the gate and like let people on that day. And these missionaries came up, and I saw their tags, and I knew they were missionaries, but I was just like, "Hey, are you guys LDS missionaries?" And they're like, "Yeah, we are." They're like, "How do you know about the church?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I used to go to church." And they're like, "Oh man, like, here's our card. Give us a call." And I did give them a call.
What made you want to give him a call? Like after, the place you were in, and what made you want to do that?
I I honestly couldn't tell you. I think I just felt bad maybe for ghosting the church for so long. And so I did give them a call, and they invited me over for dinner, but it was pretty random. And me and my girlfriend, we got married a little bit before that. So I go to dinner with them, with these missionaries, and I'm telling them all about my wife and all about like my life and stuff, and not all like the bad parts, but just kind of like how my life has gone and why I joined the military, not a mission. And I was like, I felt so good about it, and they're like, "We'll come to church." And I was like, "Okay, like I'll come." So I was planning on going to church that next Sunday, and I went out to my car, and my car was dead, and I was like, "Of course, like this would happen." So I text them, "Hey, my car's dead. Like I can't make it this Sunday." Like no worries. The next week, my then wife, she called me and was like, "Hey, I'm done. Like I can't do this anymore. Like I want to get divorced." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Because she was in college in Utah, and she wasn't a member, but she was in Utah. I think in high school we were a good match, but after high school, definitely probably not a great match. And I think it was so comfortable being together, and then it just broke at one point. And for the better, she's doing her thing and I'm doing mine. But that happened, and the missionaries kept on trying to contact me, and I was like so embarrassed that I'm getting divorced now. And so I started ghosting them too. They'd reach out to me, and they'd ask me like, "How's your wife? How's your family back home?" And I just was like, "Nope, this is not happening." And that divorce, like, you know, it put me in such a bad spot. And a few weeks later, I was like, I just need to go home and like see my mom, see my dad, and see my brother and sisters. And so I went home, and I was at like my lowest ever. And I was drinking a lot. I was using a lot of nicotine and just like in a very, very dark spot, and I didn't go to church once with my mom. And usually, I would go to church with my mom to make her feel better. Oh, it sounds terrible, but at that point, like I just stopped believing in God. It wasn't even so much like, oh, I'm not liking the church. It was just like, God has a path for everybody, and like if this is my path, like there's no God. Like I just got divorced. I just did like all this bad stuff's happening, right? And I didn't think I'd not just go to like the LDS church, but just like church in general was just like a no go for me. And one of my best friends, who it's crazy because he like considers himself a pagan, and he like loves like the Viking stuff and all that. He's like one of the most Christ-like people I know when it comes to like serving and helping and caring. And so me and him got really close, and I was like, you know what, like this pagan stuff sounds pretty cool. But then it just like didn't really go anywhere from there, and I didn't want to do any like rituals, and so I just started consuming a lot of like just anti LDS and just like stuff about God and Jesus, like just how it's not real, or just a lot more anti-LDS stuff was popping up because that was like when things started getting really popular with that community. And so then that just tanked everything even more. And throughout this entire time, like I was getting heavily tattooed. And that also kind of made me think that like the church and the members like didn't like me or looked down on me or just like didn't approve of me. And so like me doing that was just kind of like a way to get away from like a lot of the pain I was feeling too. I think it's not a good thing, but it's like tattoos are super addictive. And once you get one, you're just like, oh, I want 100 more. And so that kind of like was like therapy for me too, in a way, which is sounds weird. All of this like happened within probably 6 months, and I was having a super hard time. And I went back to Italy after a few weeks back in the United States, just at my lowest, just didn't care about anything, just making bad choices left and right, completely disregarding anything that had to do with church. And people would ask me like, "Oh, like I heard you're Mormon," and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm Mormon. Like I'm not really." And I tell them I just say that to make my family happy. So I got back to Italy, and that's when I met my now wife, Grace.
Was she living in Italy at the time?
Yeah, so she was stationed in Italy too. She was in the military. Um, and my friend, the so-called pagan one day we were having a conversation, and he's like, "Dude, like that girl, like she was not it for you. Like I know you, and you're gonna fall in love with somebody who likes the same things as you and likes tattoos and has tattoos and all this stuff." And I was like, "Okay, like whatever you say." And then like a couple weeks later, I met Grace, and we were just friends. And then I liked one of her stories she posted on Instagram. She like posted a selfie, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, this guy likes me." And then she texted me. Oh,
Love a good social media love story.
yeah. And I went on some tourist trips. I went to the UK, and I watched this band in a whiskey bar and sent her one of the songs, and it was a Johnny Cash song. And she was like, "Oh, that's my favorite song." And I was like, "No, that's my favorite song." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, we're perfect for each other." Kind of as a joke, but I was like trying to be a little flirty. And so then I came back from Scotland, and I moved into her house, and we are dating and just having a good time. And we would go travel places, and we went to Scotland, and we did all this stuff. And December of 2023, we took a Christmas trip, and my friend Grant, he texted me while we were on that trip and said, "Dude, I just had the craziest dream." I was like, "Oh, what's up?" And he's like, uh, "Grace had a baby." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that was crazy." And then 2 weeks later, Grace found out she was pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, "How does that work?" Like, I couldn't believe it. And when we found out she was pregnant, I got a new job. So I applied for a job in the same office as her. And our boss in the office, she was like okay with us like dating and stuff. And she was like, "Oh, I'm going to call you guys mom and dad of the office now." And I was like, "Why would you say that?" Like, our boss is way older than us. Like, I was 20, 22, 23 maybe at the time. And I was like, "That's weird." So then we got home, and I was like, "Hey, like take a pregnancy test." And found out she was pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
So that was quite wild. I was terrified to tell my mom, and terrified to tell my dad, and terrified to tell my grandpa. More so my mom and my grandpa because of the church, and my dad because I just thought he was going to be mad at me. None of them were mad. They were all like super ecstatic. But at that point, like I had nothing on my mind about church involved with the baby. Like it was just, "Oh, we're going to have a baby." And there was a few small combos, like how we wanted to raise our kid. Like, "Oh, would we take him to a church, or would we do this?" And I was like, "Oh, like I think I'll teach him about like churches, and then he can make his own decision when he gets older." Because I just thought that that was going to be like the right thing to do. My grandpa, when I called him, he was like, "Okay, well, congrats." And then he said something about church, and I was just like, "I don't care about that." So then we're going to go back home to have a baby shower, and I had to prepare Grace about all the Mormons that she was about to meet. And she didn't really know what like Mormons were. And I was like, "But the one thing you have to prepare for are these conversations you're going to have with my grandpa. And he's just notorious for these conversations." with everybody in our family. I have like 36 cousins, and every single one of us has gotten one of these talks. So she talked to him, and I talked to him when we got there. And the whole talk with me was like, oh, you need to go back to church. And I was just like, dude, please, like, no, like, please don't start this. And the same thing with Grace. He was like, well, you just start reading about our church. And she was like, okay, like, I will. And I was like, don't, like, you don't have to. Um, but little did I know, it made me think so much over the next couple weeks. And I was just like, huh, like, just, why does he want me to like come back to church so much, But at the same time, I was just like, whatever, I don't care. But when we got back to Italy, like a week later, I quit drinking. Just, I don't know why. I just quit. And then I texted my grandpa and I was like, hey, I want to have weekly calls with you now. And he was like, all right, let's do it. So I started calling him every week, and every single call, he would ask me if I'm going back to church. And I would say no. And then I finally, after like 4 or 5 weeks, I called my mom and I was like, hey, mom, can you tell your father to stop talking to me about church? Like, I am tired of it. I just want to talk to my grandpa. He's like, okay, I'll talk to him. She called him and was like, hey, Brandon just wants to talk to his grandpa. He doesn't want to talk to the old stake president or something. She said like that. And he was like, okay. So then we called, and he was just like, I'm sorry. I just felt like I could have done more when you were younger, and I'm trying to like catch up. And it like killed me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like he's coming out of a place of like regret that he didn't do it sooner. And I felt so terrible. And this was probably 4 months before Grace was due. And so after that phone call, I was like, shoot, like something told me to say a prayer. I don't know. I haven't said a prayer in years. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to say a prayer. But I said a prayer, and I just asked. I wasn't even like, just dear Heavenly Father. I was just like, if you're listening, like, please tell me something. And it was like, go back to church. And I was like, no way. Like, it's not that easy. It was again and again, like, go back to church. My grandpa is like friends with somebody in Salt Lake City who works in the same office as somebody who is in charge of military missionaries. And he was like, oh, I already got the missionaries' numbers, and I'm going to call them and give them your number, and they're going to call you. Like, all this like texting and calling happened. And then like, a few weeks later, I was at church, and I was so embarrassed to go to church. I got there. I didn't want to be there, and it was fine. And I didn't take the sacrament, and everybody was so kind and loving and friendly. I was, oh man, like this is really weird. Like I thought they would look at me weird and be like, oh, who's this guy? And then I went home, and Grace was at a Taylor Swift concert, 7 months pregnant. He comes back home on that Monday, right after church, and he's like, oh, how was it? And I was like, oh, it was good. And she's like, all right, can I go with you next week? I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, I want to go. And I was like, no, you don't. And she's like, yeah, I do. I was like, all right, like if you want to. So we went to church the next week. In the military, everybody's always leading. And so she was sitting next to me, and they were like, all right, well, since this family's leaving, our tradition, we sing God Be With You Till We Meet Again. And that's my all-time favorite song. And instantly, like, I got so hot and I felt like throwing up. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what's going on? And we stand up to sing it, and I am bawling, like, sobbing. And she's looking at me like, what? And it was really like the most spiritual feeling I've ever felt in my life. And we left, and she was just like, are you okay? And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I've never felt this in my life. And like a month later, she gave birth to our son. And when I was holding him for the first time, I was like, there's nothing that's going to stop me from being sealed to my family now. Like, it was that hard of a switch of like, I didn't want anything to do. And it's like, now I'm going to do everything I can to be sealed to my family. So then we went back to church, after a few weeks, and had a meeting with the bishop. And I was like, I want to get the priesthood, and I want to go back to the temple. And in my mind, I had like no plans for Grace. Like, she was going to do whatever she wanted to do. And he was like, all right, let's do it. So we started the process of all that. And I was like, so how do I repent? And he's like, this will stick with me forever. He was like, to repent is to change. And he's like, you've already done that by coming back to church. And
Wow.
I was like completely speechless. I was just,
Oof, I got the chills. Just barely.
yeah. Um, and I was just like, wow, like, really? And he was like, yeah. And he's like, your family has been the biggest blessing in this sport has had in a long time. Um, and I was just like, all right, like, if you say so, like let's do it. And from there on, I started doing what I needed to do, and me and Grace got married. And then right after we got married, she's like, hey, I want to take lessons from the missionaries. And I was like, right, like, let's do it then. Like, so we talked to the missionaries, and they would come over and give her some lessons. And the missionary that was giving the majority of the lessons, his name was Elder David, and he was from France. And so his English wasn't very good. He was supposed to be there speaking Italian, but he was in our ward speaking English to us. It was his last lesson that he was teaching because he was about to move. And after they left, Grace was like, I want to get baptized by him. And I was like, well, he leaves next week. And she was like, okay, I'll get baptized this week.
God.
And I was like, what's the heck's going on? And so right before she got baptized, I got the Melchizedek priesthood. And then she got baptized. And then a few weeks later, I gave our son, his name's Cash, after Johnny Cash.
Oh my gosh, I
I,
love that.
I gave him his baby blessing. And then that was that. And they had to leave before me because she got out of the military. So she left. And then that's when I really started like digging to like relearn everything. And then that takes me to like kind of the final thing where like my faith has never been stronger because we I know you talked to recently, this is his name Joseph. He just went on there. He's going on a
Hmm.
mission.
Yep.
Yeah, so he went to Palmyra, and he was like asking and begging for an answer that it's true, right? And he didn't like really get it there. But we went to Palmyra because she lived near Buffalo, so it's like 3 hours to that area. I was like, hey, like this place is a few hours away. Let's go. And we went, and it was the craziest experience I've ever had. Like the second craziest compared to the first we just talked about. But we went, and we were standing in the Smith cabin, and the sister missionaries were like, oh, one morning Joseph Smith ran down these stairs and ran out the back into the sacred grove. And it's like I saw him doing it, and the door opened, and it was just like full body chills, and I started crying like right there. And I was like, oh my gosh, like why am I crying? And then we leave, and we're walking to the next cabin, and Grace was like, she looked at me and her eyes were all watery. And she's like, were you crying? And I was like, yeah, were you? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, why? And she's like, I felt like I saw him walking down the stairs and running out. And I was like,
Oh
no
my
way.
gosh.
Me too. Um, and then we finished that tour, and we went to the Sacred Grove, and we were about to go home, and I was like, no, let's go to the print shop. So we went there, and we were touring it, and it was cool, and it was just like just interesting facts more so than the spirit being there. And obviously the spirit was there, like it was very peaceful. And we get to the top floor, there's all these paintings everywhere. There's like this huge painting of when Christ first came to the Americas and was teaching the people there. And that's like the big, like the cellar that everybody goes to and takes pictures of. And these small paintings in the back of the room were like really like something was calling me to them. And I walked up to them, and one of my direct ancestors, his name is C.A. Christensen, and he is a famous LDS painter, and he painted these paintings, and they were all originals. And I was like, oh my gosh. So my grandparents have paintings of his originals in their house. And I was like,
Wow.
this is like my ancestor. And the whole room was just like going crazy. They're like, oh my gosh, you're famous, you're famous. And but other than that, like the spirit was like everybody in that room was like we feel something here that like is super special. And we got in the car, and we were driving off, and we just started crying. And I was just like, my faith has been completely restored and more than like I could ever imagine. For me to be at this point in my life, like to where I was and where I saw where I was just like so crazy to me. I always tell everybody when they ask, and they ask about like how I feel about me coming back and stuff. It's God had a plan for me, just as He does for everybody. And it sucks that my my plan and my path was like as hard as it could have been. And but ultimately, like I know in my heart of hearts that he knew I would come back to church at this time and everything, and that was his plan for me. They asked like, "Oh, do you wish you went on a mission?" And I think it would have been amazing, but if I could do it again, I don't think I would, because my testimony is stronger now than I think it would have been if I went on a mission. Yeah, that brings me to here, and we're moving back to the States, and we just got done with our temple classes, and we're doing our endowments here in a few months, and we're getting sealed in the Palmyra Temple this
Oh
summer.
my gosh, that's so exciting.
Yeah,
That is
that's
so cool.
yeah.
I think in regards to like your comment about the mission, I think about my husband. My husband went on a mission and he got sent home early from his mission
Mhm.
for breaking the rules. And he's episode 2 on the podcast if you want to check it out. But his
Oh
story is
yeah.
really amazing. He got sent home early from his mission, but something that like we are missionaries in the LDS 12 step program now, and it's like I think that sometimes like our mission looks different than just a regular mission that you go on when you're 18 years old. Like I think sometimes it looks different, but our mission is as impactful as that. And he wants to wear his missionary tag everywhere. It's so sweet. And sometimes we'll be like running late for church and my missionary tag is upstairs, or I forget my tag, or we'll get to church and I forgot to wear my tag. And he's just like, you need to wear your missionary tag. Like it is so, it is so important to him. And like,
Yeah.
I just love that so much because it's like sometimes missions look different. Sometimes they don't look
Mhm.
like a standard mission. And that just doesn't mean that it's any less important.
Yeah, and that I mean, and it brings me like full circle to when I first joined, and I was telling everybody like, "Oh, this is my mission. This is my personal mission." And then like full circle moment, and I look back on that, and I'm like, even then, like something in me knew that those were the right words, even though then like I was saying it in a different way, like looking back on it, like it was completely true, and that's like I want people to know that like for my brother, for example, he's on a mission in Peru right now. And he was having a really hard time. And I was like, dude, like you just need to pray and think about it and you'll know. And I know it's such like a like basic thing, like, oh, just pray about it. But he would tell me, he'd text me like, do I pray about it? And like I didn't feel anything. And I was like, okay, like you can keep praying about it. Like I don't know what you want me to tell you. And he was like, well, I was thinking about joining the military. And I was like, are you just saying that because it's what I did? And he was like, well, yeah. And I was like, all right, like this is your life. Like, what's your goal? What's and it's working for him, and he's doing his thing now, and I just want that to be like for everybody. My sister, I don't think she's gonna do a mission, but I have no doubt in my mind that if that's what God told her to do, if she prays about it, then she's gonna have her own mission, and I think she's gonna do just as amazing things.
Yeah, I totally
So,
agree with that. It's interesting like hearing your story because you just have no idea what God is doing with somebody. You just have no
mm-mm.
idea what he will do to bring his children back.
Yeah.
And like that is so evident in your story. And I just love your story is so amazing.
Well, thank you. I wouldn't be here without Grace and Cash. After she got baptized, I gave the Holy Ghost talk in her baptism, and then we bore our testimonies a couple weeks later, and then we gave talks, and she was giving her talk, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like my talk is trash. And so I'm sitting in the pew holding Cash, and I'm like typing more into my talk because I'm like pulling quotes from Thomas S. Monson and Russell M. Nelson. Like I need big heavy hitters, and she's pulling quotes from like these like people I've never heard of, like of the 70, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like. And then I gave my talk, and all of our talks in Italy are recorded, so our family members can see them back in the States. And all my family was like, dude, you suck. Like she is so good. I was like, bro, like come on, like. And one of the most influential people in my life, his name is Brandon Bird. He baptized my dad, and he's been like a family member to me. he texted me and was like, she sounded like she's been a member her whole life. And he was like, and I don't even want to talk about you or something like that. But yeah,
Gosh.
like her just like, he took the rope and just ran with it. And every talk she gives, like, I am just like, I don't know, it's crazy. But her and Cash are really the reason that not just like me coming back to church, but me like just wanting to grow so much as a family. And
Hmm.
yeah,
I
it's
love that
amazing.
so much. I have one more question for you. So, in the beginning, we were talking about like how it's not the cool thing.
Hmm.
And I mean, depending on who your circle is. Personally, I think it's very cool. But in the world will say that like being a member of the church is the cool thing. Like
Yeah.
the world will tell you that like drinking and partying and like sleeping around and all that, that the world will tell you that's cool. And
Mm.
when you have a lot of like friends in that circle or family that think that the church is uncool. Like, what is your take on that now? Because we started off talking about that. And then after you
Yeah.
share all your spiritual experiences that happen to you, it's like, it's so silly to think that anybody could ever think that
Oh yeah.
that what you have experienced is anything but the most cool experience you can have in life.
Yeah. I did all of that stuff, and to think that it's so cool, like the and then to like not do it, like I still had the same friends, but I was just making like conscious decisions after that. And I was like really like it's so like I think it's funny to say, but like I was actually like thinking about what I was doing and what I was saying, and like as an adult, it's like, oh, all adults like should be thinking before they do something. But like it's just not true, like um as from a kid to like to adults, you just follow suits. And um so I think like the biggest thing for me was just thinking about like what I'm doing, and then also like having a goal and having a purpose.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's the big thing. And like with Cash, like the closer to him being born, like the more I started like making better decisions, because I was like, I don't want to be the dad that's drinking and doing this and doing that. And I was like, well, I'm gonna make Cash my purpose. And after he was born, it was like, oh, I'm gonna make being sealed to grace in the temple my purpose. And then after that, it was so easy to just
Yeah.
cruise through and do all that.
I can relate to that so much because when I got sober, I had spent so many years just like focusing on like, okay, like I got to get sober because I have all these problems. Like I have issues that I need to like figure out how to like resolve. And I, I need therapy because I have all these problems and I'm solving them with drugs. And then like after my last rehab stay, um, which by the way, I'm celebrating 13 years sober today. And
Oh,
so
that is
just
amazing.
just
Congrats.
had to like bring that up.
Good for you.
Thank you. But I shifted my focus from how do I fix what's wrong with me to I'm going to make a goal to get my Templar recommend and I'm going to do everything
Mm,
I need to do to get my Templar recommend and I'm going to like experiment and see how this makes me feel. And that changed everything for me because I focused on the goal and I focused on who I could become with my savior and that changed everything for me.
yeah, no, that was exactly the same thing. But for me, it was getting the priesthood. That was like the first step, and getting that, and then it was the temple after that, and it was like that's my one goal is to get to that spot, and then because with the priesthood, it was like okay, then you can give Cash his baby blessing, and that was like my big thing. Like I want to give him his blessing, and so when I got the priesthood, it was like oh, like now get his baby blessing, And one quick little crazy story with the priesthood, when I got it, the stake president, he's from Italy. So his English was kind of choppy when I met with him, and we were talking, and it was like the final interview, and he's like, let's say a prayer. So he said a prayer, and then he was like, I don't know why, but something's telling me that like somebody in your family who hasn't been to church is going to come back to church, and your dad is going to come back to church one day. Like I just feel that. And I was like, all right, this guy's crazy. And when Grace came back to the United States, her cousin was like, "Oh, I didn't know Brandon was LDS. Like I am too, and I'm going to go back to church."
Oh my gosh.
So she started going back to church, and her husband just got baptized a few months ago, and
Oh my
um,
gosh.
that was just like another like crazy thing. Like
That is
it's just,
amazing.
and then one of her closest friends out in Italy that we worked with, she was also a member, and she hadn't been to church in 10 years, and we started going back, and she texted me one day. I was like, "Hey, can I come with you?" And so she started coming back, and it's just all all this comeback.
I love it. We've got a whole queue of guests ready to come back on
Yeah.
Comeback Podcast.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. This was so good and just everything my heart needed today. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Like I saw this podcast, and because I follow so many like LDS influencers and all that stuff, and the podcast was like always being recommended like on the more people to follow, and then I clicked on it and spent like an hour just going through every reel, just watching all of them, and I was like, "Oh man, that'd be so cool." And then I got the email just like a week ago, and I was like, "No way." So thank
That's
you so
amazing.
much. Like this has been awesome.
Surf Clothing is one of our favorite brands. They have been supporting us since the very beginning. We love them so much. I think one of the things that I like about Surf so much is that my husband is literally obsessed, and I brought him in here to share his experience with Surf Clothing. So, Jesse, tell us.
I love Serve Clothing. This is the best shirt that I've ever owned for church and professional purposes. It's got four-way stretch, which makes it really nice because not all the time I'm at my desk. Oftentimes I'm moving and out and about. So it's really nice to have a flexible shirt that moves with me. I know that it's got a mesh collar that I love. I think the purpose of that is really to prevent stains, but it's also super comfortable. It's way more comfortable around my neck. You know, if I'm at church or in business meetings with a tie or whether I don't have a tie, it's really comfortable. It's got arm vents, which I love because I'm kind of a bigger fella. It helps me so that I can be a bit breathable, and I love it.
And also, you can get 15% off a shirt from Serve by using the code COMEBACK. A lot of people have asked us how they can support the podcast, and we have created a Comeback Podcast merch line on our website, www.comebackpodcast.org. All of the money made from the merch goes right back into the podcast. So if you are interested in supporting the podcast and you want to purchase some merch, we would love it. Check it out. Thank you so much for being a supporter of the Comeback Podcast and listening to our episodes. It would mean so much to us if you would like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps other people be able to find us, and we want to share this message to everyone.